Most women say they want a good man, but when they actually meet one, something quietly shuts down. Not because he's boring, not because he made a mistake, not because he lacked confidence or direction, but because his presence doesn't feel familiar. If you've ever been walked away from after showing consistency, clarity, and respect, this wasn't random. It wasn't bad timing, and it wasn't a failure on your part. What you experienced has a psychological explanation that almost no one talks about. Somewhere along the way, many women learned to associate love with tension, chaos, and emotional unpredictability. So when stability shows up, when a man is grounded, direct, and emotionally regulated, the nervous system doesn't always register safety. It registers difference, and difference often feels like danger. That's why doing everything right can still lead to rejection. Not because you weren't enough, but because you didn't fit a familiar emotional pattern. And when you don't understand what's happening beneath the surface, the mind does what it always does. It turns inward. You start questioning your worth instead of questioning the conditioning. This video is about breaking that confusion. It's about understanding why being a good man can feel like a disadvantage in certain dynamics, and why that reality has nothing to do with your value. Attraction is not a moral decision. It's not logical, and it's not something people consciously choose. Attraction is a conditioned response, shaped by repetition, emotional exposure, and early experiences long before adulthood. No one is born knowing what emotional safety feels like. The nervous system learns through patterns. It learns what to expect from closeness, from conflict, from love. And for many women, those lessons didn't come from stability or consistency. They came from unpredictability, emotional distance, or environments where love had to be earned rather than received. When that becomes the reference point, the body adapts. It learns to stay alert. It learns to read shifts in tone, mood, and availability. Over time, tension becomes normal. Emotional highs and lows become familiar. And familiarity, not health, becomes the foundation of attraction. This is where confusion starts for men who show up grounded and consistent. You assume that calm presence will be felt as safety, but safety is only soothing when the nervous system has learned to recognize it. Without that exposure, stability doesn't register as comfort. It registers as something unknown, and the nervous system treats the unknown carefully. Sometimes it pulls back. Sometimes it creates distance. Sometimes it rejects the situation entirely, without a clear explanation that makes sense on the surface. This isn't about women consciously choosing chaos. It's about the body responding to what it knows how to process. Until that conditioning is understood, rejection will feel personal, even when it isn't. Most women were never taught what a good man actually looks like in real life. Not in theory, not in slogans, and not in the simplified advice people repeat without understanding it. This statement makes many uncomfortable because it sounds like blame, but this isn't about fault. It's about exposure. No one enters adulthood with a built-in ability to recognize emotional safety. That skill is learned through observation. It's absorbed by watching how men handle pressure, how they keep their word, how they show consistency without needing applause. And for many women, that model simply wasn't present. They didn't grow up seeing a man who remained calm during conflict. They didn't observe a man who was steady, grounded, and emotionally regulated. Instead, what they witnessed was absence, inconsistency, or emotional volatility mistaken for passion. Over time, that becomes the blueprint. So when a man shows up with clarity, integrity, and stability, something doesn't click. Not because he's lacking, but because he doesn't match anything stored in her internal reference system. There's no familiar signal to interpret. This is where men get confused. You were told that being respectful, reliable, and intentional was the goal, and it is. But recognition depends on familiarity. You cannot recognize what you've never seen. And when stability has never been modeled, it doesn't feel like home. It feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar often gets rejected before it's understood. This is where an important distinction needs to be made. A nice guy and a good man are not the same thing, even though they're often confused as one. A nice guy is driven by approval. He adapts himself to be liked. He softens his boundaries, over-explains his intentions, and compromises his values to maintain connection. His behavior changes based on feedback, praise, or the fear of rejection. On the surface, this can look kind and accommodating, but underneath, it's rooted in insecurity. A good man operates differently. He has principles. He knows who he is and acts consistently whether or not he's being rewarded for it. He doesn't perform for affection, and he doesn't bend his values to keep someone comfortable. His behavior is stable, predictable, and grounded. And this is where the misunderstanding happens. To someone who grew up without emotional safety, predictability doesn't always feel comforting. It can feel suspicious. When chaos has been normal, consistency feels unfamiliar. When love has required effort and endurance, ease feels undeserved. This doesn't mean women consciously reject good men. Most of the time, they don't even know what they're reacting to. They only feel that something is off. And unfamiliarity, especially at an emotional level, is often misinterpreted as incompatibility rather than a lack of reference. When the family doesn't teach what to look for in a man, culture steps in to fill the gap, not carefully, not responsibly, loudly, repeatedly, and with very specific incentives. For many women, their understanding of men didn't come from observing a healthy relationship up close. It came from movies, music, social media, and stories designed to provoke emotion, not teach discernment. And emotion, especially intense emotion, is what holds attention. Culture consistently rewards men who are dramatic, unpredictable, and emotionally intense. Men whose behavior creates highs and lows. Men whose value is measured by attention, status, or force of personality. Over time, these portrayals don't stay on the screen. They become internalized as a felt definition of attraction. Attraction slowly becomes linked to adrenaline. Desire gets confused with uncertainty. Emotional spikes are mistaken for chemistry, while calm presence starts to feel flat by comparison. This isn't about women preferring unhealthy men. That framing is shallow and inaccurate. What's really happening is conditioning. The nervous system learns through repetition, not reason. It doesn't ask whether something is good or bad. It only registers what is familiar. So when chaos is familiar, calm feels strange. And when calm feels strange, it often gets labeled as boring, even when it's exactly what creates long-term stability. This is where biology complicates everything. What people call chemistry is often a chemical reaction, not a sign of compatibility. Dopamine thrives on novelty and unpredictability. Cortisol rises in unstable dynamics. Together, they create intensity, an emotional charge that feels exciting and alive. Now compare two men. One is inconsistent. He disappears, then returns. His attention is unpredictable. Every interaction feels charged because nothing is guaranteed. The body stays alert, engaged, slightly anxious. That anxiety gets misread as desire because it activates familiar chemicals. The other man is clear. He shows up when he says he will. His communication is direct. There are no emotional games, no sudden withdrawals, no highs and lows to manage. Logically, he's the better choice. Emotionally, he can feel underwhelming to a nervous system conditioned to chaos. Safety doesn't flood the system, it regulates it. And regulation feels boring to someone who has learned to associate intensity with meaning. The body doesn't reach for what's healthy. It reaches for what it knows how to process. This is why rejection can feel so confusing. It's not about depth or value. It's about familiarity. When calm has never been linked to attraction, it doesn't register as chemistry. And no amount of effort, patience, or proving yourself can override that conditioning. That's not pessimism, that's psychology. When a woman encounters a genuinely grounded man, her first reaction is often not relief. It's tension. On a nervous system level, something unexpected happens. Instead of relaxing, the body hesitates. Not because he's dangerous, but because he's unfamiliar. A good man doesn't create emotional uncertainty. He doesn't withhold affection to gain leverage. He doesn't keep someone guessing to feel wanted. His presence is steady. His intentions are clear. And for someone raised around emotional instability, that steadiness doesn't feel safe. It feels exposed. Chaos gives structure to survival-based environments. There are rules to dysfunction. You learn when to brace, when to adapt, when to disappear. Calm removes those signals. Calm forces presence, and presence is uncomfortable when you've learned to survive by staying alert. This is why kindness can be misread as weakness, why consistency can feel suffocating, why emotional availability can register as pressure instead of intimacy. A grounded man doesn't trigger familiar emotional highs and lows. There's no chase, no unpredictability, no emotional spike to organize around. So the sequence unfolds quietly. First comes confusion. She can't explain what feels wrong, only that something feels different. Then comes withdrawal. Messages slow down. Energy shifts. Finally comes rejection, often without a clear explanation. From the outside, it looks irrational. From the inside, it's a nervous system reacting to the unfamiliar. Trauma bonding isn't about chaos for the sake of chaos. It's about familiarity. It forms when pain becomes the emotional language someone learned to associate with connection. Over time, the nervous system stops asking, "Is this healthy?" and starts asking, "Does this feel like home?" For many women, love wasn't modeled as safety. It was modeled as tension, emotional uncertainty, or the need to earn affection. As a result, the body learned an unhealthy equation early on. Anxiety equals attachment, emotional intensity equals meaning, and pain equals closeness. This is how certain beliefs quietly form. Jealousy becomes proof of care. Control gets reframed as protection. Emotional volatility feels like passion, and calm, genuine interest feels empty because it doesn't activate the same internal alarms. When a relationship starts to feel stable, discomfort often follows. A quiet voice surfaces, "This won't last," or "I don't deserve this." Instead of sitting with that discomfort, self-sabotage begins. She pulls away, questions intentions, creates distance, or tests stability until something breaks. When the relationship ends, the original belief feels confirmed, even if her own behavior contributed to the outcome. From the outside, it looks self-destructive. Internally, it feels familiar. This is why some women feel more bonded to men who hurt them than to men who treat them well. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because suffering gives the nervous system something it knows how to organize around. Peace, when unfamiliar, can feel unsettling rather than safe. This is where many grounded, emotionally capable men get stuck. Not because they are weak, but because they are responsible. When you recognize fear or trauma beneath someone's behavior, the instinct is to stabilize it. You tell yourself that patience, understanding, and consistency will eventually make things feel safe. This is the savior trap. At first, it sounds noble. You stay calm when she's reactive. You absorb emotional swings. You adjust your behavior to avoid triggering discomfort you didn't create. You believe that if you hold steady long enough, the chaos will settle. But slowly, the dynamic changes. Your energy stops going toward your purpose and starts going toward damage control. Conversations revolve around reassurance. Emotional labor becomes constant. You begin monitoring moods, timing words, and shrinking parts of yourself to keep the peace. This is the cost most men underestimate. You lose focus, you lose momentum, you lose parts of your identity that once defined you. And the more you give, the more is expected. When someone hasn't learned to regulate themselves, they often outsource that regulation to the person closest to them. Empathy without boundaries turns into self-betrayal. Understanding someone's wounds does not obligate you to absorb their consequences, and staying in a dynamic that requires you to disappear is not loyalty. It's slow erosion disguised as patience. Understanding where a pattern comes from does not mean you are responsible for carrying it. A woman can be shaped by her past and still be accountable for how she shows up in the present. Explanation is not the same as excuse. Healthy relationships require two people who are willing to look at themselves honestly. You cannot build something stable with someone who refuses to examine the beliefs driving their behavior. You cannot regulate a dynamic when only one person is doing the emotional work. This is where boundaries become essential, not as ultimatums and not as punishments, but as acts of self-respect. Boundaries are how you protect the life you are building. They define what you will participate in and what you will not. A good man does not reparent adults. He does not reprogram someone's nervous system through sacrifice, and he does not carry a relationship on his back while calling it love. That isn't strength. That's self-erasure. When you hold your standards calmly and consistently, something important happens. The dynamic clarifies. Either the other person takes responsibility and grows, or they remove themselves from the equation. Both outcomes restore alignment. Self-respect is not about control, it's about integrity. And integrity means refusing to abandon yourself to maintain a connection that requires you to shrink, bend, or disappear. When you stop negotiating your core values, the entire dynamic shifts. Not through force, not through arguments, but through consistency. A good man doesn't beg to be understood. He doesn't over-explain himself to be accepted. And he doesn't audition for love by tolerating chaos. Integrity has a quiet authority to it. It doesn't chase. It doesn't threaten. It simply stands. When you remain grounded in who you are, you stop seeking validation from someone who hasn't learned how to receive it. And in that space, clarity replaces confusion. This is where many men misunderstand boundaries. Holding your ground is not an ultimatum. It's a filter. You are not punishing anyone by refusing to abandon yourself. You are choosing alignment over attachment. When this happens, one of two things occurs. Either she rises to meet the standard, or she steps away. Both outcomes serve you, because what you are filtering for is not attention, but readiness. A good man doesn't wait to be chosen. He chooses where he belongs. He leads his life instead of orbiting someone else's instability. That isn't arrogance, it's self-respect. And self-respect is what creates the conditions for a relationship that adds to your life instead of consuming it. Here's the truth most men never hear clearly enough. Not every woman is ready for a good man, and that reality says nothing about your value. Some people are oriented toward peace. Others are still organized around survival. When a woman hasn't learned how to receive stability, consistency won't feel like relief. It will feel like disruption. And you are not required to make yourself smaller to be less disruptive. A good man doesn't prove his worth by enduring chaos. He doesn't negotiate his principles to stay connected to someone who hasn't done the work to meet him where he stands. That isn't coldness, it's responsibility. Responsibility to his direction, his values, and the life he's building. When you stop abandoning yourself, life reorganizes. The wrong dynamics fall apart. The wrong people drift away. What remains is alignment or solitude, and both are preferable to losing yourself slowly in the name of connection. If this message resonated, don't treat it as entertainment. Treat it as a line in the sand. Stay conscious, stay grounded, and choose environments that can sustain the man you've become. If this message hit close to home, don't scroll past it like it was just another video. Use it as a checkpoint. Awareness only matters when it changes what you tolerate. Subscribe, not for motivation, not for entertainment, but as a commitment to staying conscious in a culture that profits from confusion. Like this video so it reaches the men who are questioning themselves instead of questioning unhealthy patterns, and share it with someone who's been carrying too much for too long. If you're willing, leave a comment with one sentence you're done compromising on. Not a rant, not an explanation, just a line in the sand. That sentence might do more for your life than you realize.